Johnny, I'm begging you, don't talk about a so-called pandemic that may or may not have took place over the last 3 years. Don't do it. Why? Why? Because YouTube have already dragged us down twice. We'll be banned. True, we have been dragged off air, kicking and screaming a couple of times and censored by YouTube. But I don't see how they can do it this time because we're just quoting bloody Newsweek. Newsweek? Well, they have been around for a while, Johnny, that's true, but I'm still doubtful. So we're going to bloody go through it, Johnny, right here on the Ask Johnny channel. And it appears that some of the things we've suspected the government and the health authorities of doing over the years, they're bloody admitting to.
We're starting to apologize for being so wrong about COVID. Oh, they're trying to get out in front of it now. By the way, you see, so remember this was from The Atlantic. We covered this. Let's declare a pandemic amnesty. Let's focus on the future. Oh, yeah? Because the past doesn't look good for you, right? Yeah, let's look.
Jesus, yeah.
So now there's the new one. It's time, this is in Newsweek. It's time for scientific community to admit we were wrong about COVID and it costs lives. And this guy wrote it, a guy named Kevin Bass.
Here it is, here, Johnny. We've got it up on the bloody computer. Have a look. It's time for the scientific community to admit we were wrong about COVID and it cost lives. Now, this bloke goes on to say, Johnny, as a medical student and researcher, I staunchly supported the efforts of the public health authorities when it came to COVID-19. I believed that the authorities responded to the largest public health crisis of our lives with compassion, diligence and scientific expertise. I was with them when they called for lockdowns, vaccines and boosters. I was wrong. We in the scientific community were wrong and it cost lives. Jesus Christ, over to you, Jimmy.
Okay, so I can see now that the scientific community from the CDC to the WHO to the FDA and their representatives repeatedly overstated the evidence and misled the public about its own views and policies. So they're lying the whole time, just like we thought.
Jesus Christ! Including
they lied about natural versus artificial immunity, school closures and disease transmission, aerosol spread, mask mandates, vaccine effectiveness and safety, especially among the young.
Oh, shit!
All of these were scientific mistakes at the time, not in hindsight.
Scientific mistakes at the time?
They were scientific mistakes at the time, meaning they knew they were wrong at the time. Of course they did. As we found out from the European Union's Parliament, asked the question of a Pfizer executive, hey, when did you test for these for transmission? And she said, we never even tested. So they knew they were lying. So these aren't whoopsie daisies. But amazingly, some of these obfuscations, meaning lies, continue to this present day.
Obfuscations.
Obfuscations.
But perhaps more important than any individual error was how inherently flawed the overall approach of the scientific community was and continues to be, as Jay Bhattacharya from Stanford came on the show and told us.
Stanford.
I think he's from Stanford. He said that we've had pandemics in the past and we never did lockdowns before. We never had mandatory...
Not even the Spanish flu.
Right, we didn't have lockdowns. We know how to handle these. It was flawed in a way that undermined its efficacy and resulted in thousands, if not millions, of preventable deaths.
Oh, shit! Did I just hear right?
Holy cow. What we did not properly appreciate is preferences determine how scientific expertise is used. And that our preferences might be, indeed our preferences were, very different from many of the people that we serve. Meaning they wanted to do shit to people, and people didn't want it done to them, and they didn't give a shit.
But perhaps more important than any individual error was how inherently flawed the overall approach of the scientific community was and continues to be. It was flawed in a way that undermined its efficacy. Jesus, let Jimmy read it, John. Jimmy, you read the bloody thing.
I was with them when they called for lockdowns, vaccines, and boosters. I was wrong. We in the scientific community were wrong, and it costs lives. Wow. That's what T means. We created policy based on our preferences, then justified it using data. And then we portrayed those opposing our efforts as misguided, ignorant, selfish, and evil. Boy, he did all that as a med student. It was flawed in a way that undermined its efficacy and resulted in thousands, if not millions, of preventable deaths. Holy cow.
As you can see, this is quite a turnaround. Back to you, Jimmy. We made science a team sport.
We made science a team sport. Yes, remember we showed Josh Olson, talked about how even if you think they're on your team, ignore them if they're not wearing a mask and saying COVID's over. Remember that?
What team is that?
So that's what I don't know what team that is.
And in so doing, we made it no longer science. It became us versus them, and they responded the only way anyone might expect them to.
By resisting.
Blah, 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 blah. Most of us did not speak up in support of alternative views, and many of us tried to suppress them.
No kidding. Still people aren't.
When strong scientific voices like world-renowned Stanford professors John Leonidas, Jay Bhattacharya and Scott Atlas, or Jesus, some of these names, Jimmy, you read it out.
Stanford professors John how do you say his name? Leonidas, Jay Bhattacharya, and Scott Atlas, or University of California, San Francisco professors Vinay Prasad and Monica Gandhi sounded the alarm on behalf of vulnerable communities. They face severe censure by relentless mobs of critics and detractors in the scientific community, often not on the basis of fact, but solely on the basis of differences in scientific opinion. Hey, I almost lost my channel for telling the truth. Trump was not remotely perfect, nor were the academic critics of consensus policy. But the scorn that we laid on them was a disaster for public trust in the pandemic response. Our approach alienated large segments of the population from what should have been a national collaborative project. And you know what the effect of all the way they did this is? Now 35% of the country considers themselves vaccine hesitant. In general, not just for this one, but all vaccines. And people stopped taking their kids to get them vaccinated. Well done.
I never had an ounce of that before how they did this. Hesitation.
Me neither. Never had an ounce of hesitation about vaccines.
I had jokes about how...
Yeah, well, that's true. I never had any vaccine hesitancy either. Did you have any vaccine hesitancy, Johnny, in the past? No, I didn't have any vaccine hesitancy either. In the past? Either.
Well done. We excluded important parts of the population from policy development and castigated critics, which meant that we deployed a monolithic response across an exceptionally diverse nation, forged a society more fractured than ever, and exacerbated long-standing health and economic disparities.
You mean neoliberal capitalism?
Yeah. Our emotional response and ingrained partisanship prevented us from seeing the full impact of our actions on the people we are supposed to serve. We systematically minimized the downsides of the interventions we imposed, meaning lockdowns, vaccines, masks, all that stuff, imposed without input, consent, and recognition of those forced to live with them.
Oh, Jimmy, this bloody article should be on mainstream news around the world tonight. Right. Yes, I see. Yeah, tonight. Holy smoke. Yeah, all frontline news, but I bet it won't even be mentioned. Well, we have been sort of saying this for quite some time. Even when a journal so famous and bloody respected as Newsweek puts out an article like that.
In so doing, we violated the autonomy of those who would be most negatively impacted by our policies: the poor, the working class, small business owners, blacks and Latinos, and children.
Well, we have been sort of saying this for quite some time, Johnny. We just couldn't do it on YouTube.